Welcome everyone for the Cloud Marathoner session tonight. I'm 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝗍𝗶𝗂, also known as Cloud Marathoner. I'm going to be your host. And today we are going to look into Cloud Marathoner community, what it is about, what we are doing here, how you can join and participate to be part of this great community, and as well as learn and look into infrastructure as a code options within Microsoft Azure. And then we'll dive into ARM templates and Bicep, but there are some other alternatives as well that you may try. And I'm going to bring up those options. Meanwhile, let me share the screen here. I'm going to try to make as little as possible of the slides. So that's why stay tuned. And if you have any questions and you join live, please put them into the chat. I will check them from time to time so that I can address your questions. First of all, maybe you have already attended some of my sessions. My name is Elhan. I'm a Microsoft MVP, as well as Microsoft Certified Trainer and MCT Community Lead. I'm very happy to contribute to this great community, and I'm very thankful to be one of the Microsoft MVPs in Microsoft Azure category to learn about technology and share the goodness and as well as the solutions that we bring with infrastructure as a code, with DevSecOps, and as well as with architectural innovations that bring efficiency to your workloads. Before joining and becoming a Microsoft MVP, I also volunteer and participate in different tech communities known as hl7fire and as well as EDIX12. In addition to that, you may see me contributing on Microsoft Tech Community and as well as MCT Community Hub chats when you have any questions regarding the topics or even about some process that might be renewed. For example, we had this renewal process for MCTs that had some questions, and I tried to help my colleagues to help with moderation with Cloud Lunch and Learn session, where we come together with friends in that community and welcome new speakers and as well as experienced ones to share their knowledge, to share their excitement, and as well as solutions with the rest of the learners. You are welcome to check me on LinkedIn if you want to get connected, and as well as on Twitter X platform. I try to use both of them, but usually you would see me posting more on LinkedIn platform. So let's get connected. So let's see what we will cover today. First, we will start with Cloud Marathoner community. If you never heard about it or you just know very little, you would get much more information from this. Then we will look into the next express introduction into Azure Bicep and as well as the ARM templates in relation to the Azure Resource Manager. Then we'll look into code reusability in Bicep. What are the neat features that you can use. Then we'll look into some extensibility that you can add into your solutions. And then we'll look into some demos between different concepts that I'm going to explain today. I hope that sounds exciting to you. Let's move on. Before going further, I want to mention a couple seconds here about the TRX Solutions. It's a mid-sized company located here in East Coast DMV area, but we have employees all across the United States, and there are a number of different customers that we are supporting. We are also cloud solution provider partners across different cloud solution services, as you may see here on the slide. In addition to that, I want to mention that with TRX Solutions, we also care about local causes and as well as the people, which involves the young YOS people, veterans, and local organization. And there is a TRX Care organization that tries to get involved in and help to the local people. That said, if you are in the market, you may check the open positions and drop me a note. I'll be glad to address your questions. And here at TRX Solutions, we are very proud to take our customer missions by solving the hard problems and finding the optimization and as well as efficiency in their solutions. Next, the Cloud Marathon community is a movement. It's not a single person. It's a social movement to help new beginners and seasoned professionals to continue cloud learning journey by sharing and inspiring innovations that are happening across the technologies, motivating each other for the next steps, and putting the plan on to upskill, helping each community member and every individual to grow professionally, and helping minority or underrepresented groups in IT to prepare to their next level, next growth, and pass their first Microsoft Cloud certification if that's one of their goals. So this is, where again it's all about motivation, community, and as well as learning the cloud technologies. If you want to get more information about that, you are more than welcome to check the cloudmarathoner.com blog site. Next here, let's look into main part, some core infrastructure as a code approach in Azure. So as you know, Azure supports multiple tools and frameworks for defining and automating infrastructure. So first of them, which is classic and well known, is Azure Resource Manager, ARM templates. If you have been with Microsoft Azure environment, you might be pretty familiar with that. This is the JSON representation of cloud resources, and it's one of the first ways how in ARM, in not the classic Azure but modern Azure platform, how the resources are represented. Next, we have Azure Bicep, which we will talk much more, so I'm not going to deep dive here. Just know that Azure Bicep is evolution of our ARM templates, and it is much easier to start and code. It's a preferred way to write your declarative. It's a preferred way to create your Azure source and declare them. Then we have, of course, Terraform by HashiCorp, which is well-established player here in infrastructure as a code. Next, we have Pulumi. It's also infrastructure as a code approach. It's more of a coding style of defining the blocks and again, to the code, describing your infrastructure solution resources. And then we have configuration management tools, where you may speak about for different type of tools like, for example, Ansible, Chef. So these are also very important parts of the configuration, and sometimes people mix them up with infrastructure as a code, but you also need to mention them. So when you have these, 5 and even more tools to do your infrastructure as a code. So what is the best practice for infrastructure as a code in Azure? It might get confusing, and I would say that there are some main points that I would like you to take away from this. And first one is prefer declarative tools. So whenever you are dealing with infrastructure as a code approach, always try to start with declarative tools, because it will save you time. Tools like ARM templates, Bicep, and Terraform, those are the desired end state declaration of the resources, where you can define your configuration rather than step-by-step building through the through running the commands. So you can declare all the configuration and everything using ARM, Bicep, or Terraform. Then, of course, another takeaway from infrastructure as a code in Azure, you want to make sure that you version control everything. So you want to make sure you store infrastructure as a code in GitHub or Azure repos or any other repository that's basically approved by your organization, by your project, so that we can have this collaboration and rollbacks whenever things don't go the desired way. Next, we need to have modularization of templates. You want to make sure you break down large templates into reusable modules for maintainability. You want to make sure that your have a good parameterized deployment of your resources, and you use your parameters for environment specific values where you can define your dev, test, prod, and any other environments. You want to make sure that your infrastructure as a code is well integrated with your CI/CD tools, which is continuous integration, continuous deployment, where you can automate deployments using the Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions or even Jenkins, depending on which tool you have, so that you can use the pipeline to deploy your resources continuously. And then you want to bake in and incorporate test and validation into your best practice of using the infrastructure as a code, where you can use tools like Terraform, Validate, or Bicep Linter to catch errors and avoid, late mistakes during the deployment. And keep in mind, you want to make sure your infrastructure is immutable, meaning that you can replace resources rather than modifying them in place to avoid any resource drift. And that said, before going to the next slide and diving more into maybe Bicep, I want to talk about when to choose which tool. So you see some tool names here on the slide. So ARM templates, basically they are deep Azure integration. They bring enterprise compliance. So even when you use the Terraform and you compile your Terraform, and before it gets deployed into the Azure ARM, into the Azure Resource Manager, and into the subscription where you want that to be deployed, or even the tenant, what happens is that code get compiled into ARM templates. So understanding ARM templates is very crucial when you are trying to debug any issues. Next is Bicep. Azure Bicep is best for Azure native deployments with simplicity and modularity. Then we have, of course, Terraform that we mentioned, which comes with multi-cloud or hybrid strategies that you can utilize. Then we have 𝗏𝗏, which is more of a developer-centric. And if your team is developer-centric and prefer general-purpose languages, then 𝗏𝗏 can do that for you. And finally, in terms of management tools, we mentioned Ansible or Chef, and you can use them when configuration management is as important as the provisioning of the resources. All right, that's it. Let's now look into what is Azure Bicep and ARM. We'll focus today on those two tools. And then if there's a desire, we can continue and then explore the rest of them in our upcoming sessions. So what is the Azure Bicep and ARM? First of all, Azure Bicep itself is a domain-specific language, meaning that it's specifically written to manage and provision resources for Microsoft Azure environment. You can't use that as a programming language. You cannot use Azure Bicep in any other cloud to declare the resources there. Its purpose is simple. Bicep has a purpose to create simple, easy, and intuitive language to author, to manage, to declare, to create Azure infrastructure as a code. So what is the Azure Bicep? It's a new DSL language that simplifies your life by provisioning and managing the Azure resources. Next, and if you are a DevOps professional or you are a developer who is working on infrastructure as a code, you can start very easily with Azure Bicep. I will show you some examples going forward. Next year, we already mentioned that Azure Bicep helps to author and manage Azure resources. And then we mentioned that's an abstraction over ARM template, meaning that when you create your Azure Bicep language code or templates, whenever you compile them, before they get deployed into the ARM layer, they all compiled into the ARM templates. So that's why it's a transparent abstraction. It's a transparent abstraction over ARM. And it's a preferred way of doing infrastructure as a code for Microsoft Azure platform. And you can find more and more examples on official Microsoft Learn pages. Now let's look at, some diagram to better understand how Azure ARM templates are related to the Bicep and how Bicep files get compiled and deployed into the Microsoft Azure environment. So here I have a classic kind of diagram as you see on the screen, which represents the Bicep file and as well as other non-template languages. So for example, once we have our Bicep file, what happens that when you compile it, it's going to create the Azure Resource Manager, or it's going to create ARM templates, which are going to go through the Azure Resource Manager, which is the layer before your resources get deployed into the Microsoft Azure environment. And then on the left side, you see non-template infrastructure as a code, which stands for that you can even have these HTTPS calls into your ARM layer in order to be able to interact with resource providers and provision, update, or change or create resources within the Microsoft Azure. So no matter which tool you are using, under the hood in this Azure Resource Manager layer, keep in mind that all that commands are going to be converted to the ARM templates if you are going to modify, update, or create an Azure resource. And keep in mind that this is the layer where all the policies are going to be checked. So if you have a specific policy that needs to be applied, and make sure that, for example, all the resources that you create on that specific subscription are provisioned in West US Europe, then that policy is going to kick in and check all the changes, making sure that you are not going to, by mistake, provision resources in South Asia or in West US regions. Okay, that's it. Let's move on here. Next here, I want to go quickly through the Azure Bicep benefits. As you see, I'm going to count some of them here so it's visible to you. So first of all, it's easy to understand and maintain, and we are going to look at examples so you would understand what I mean by that. It comes with day zero support, meaning that whenever there is a change in Microsoft Azure APIs, specifically for the resources, you would be able to talk to those changes right away if you are using native Azure Bicep language. With third-party infrastructure as a code tools, you would have to wait for that provider to make those updates. Next, we already mentioned that it's a transparent abstraction over ARM template. It comes with very cutting edge and very easy to use Visual Studio Code tooling. It comes with Bicep extension, which I'm going to show you in Visual Studio Code, and it comes with very clean code syntax. And if you continue here, it comes with great deal of code reuse and modularity. It comes with deep integration with Azure, Microsoft Azure, and as well as it comes with some pre-flight validation where you can make sure that before deploying the infrastructure into the environment, it goes through some checks, and your deployment is not going to fail half the way of the process, right? So you don't get bad deployment, so to speak. Azure Bicep does not need any state management. The session I already started that and it's recorded. So meanwhile, if you have any questions, just let me know. All right, welcome. Okay, guys, so let's continue from here. So I already mentioned that Azure Bicep doesn't require state management because it checks its status against the state machine, which is called Azure infrastructure. So each time when you try to deploy new changes, your code is going to go and through Azure ARM Manager layer, it will check the existing status and will tell you what type of change your template is going to deploy. Next, we have for Azure Bicep, it comes with production support, so you don't have to worry if you start to use that in the production and there are some issues, then you can get first-class treatment from Microsoft Azure support if something goes wrong. Okay, that's it. Next here, I want to show you a resource where you can benefit by checking it and as well as utilizing everything that's there. First one is Awesome Azure Bicep. So this is a community supported and community driven GitHub repo where community members like you, like Microsoft MVPs and MCTs, they are sharing their Azure Bicep posts, and as well as the anything that's officially released on Microsoft environment. And let me share that on the screen. So basically here, if you go to the to GitHub, and under this GitHub, if you go to my GitHub account, which is this guy over here, you can navigate by typing this URL. You would be able to scroll down here and find Awesome Azure Bicep. And this Awesome Azure Bicep is basically a community-driven repo of a collection of useful blogs, videos, getting started type of articles that can help you to get started with Azure Bicep, or if you already know the basics, how to look at the next steps, how to kind of make sure that you are getting your skills and understanding in a way that you can use them in a production environment, right? You can use some best practices. So this is the, again, Awesome Azure Bicep. I highly recommend to check that. Next here, if you are more of a video learner and you have some LinkedIn learning subscription, there are some courses on LinkedIn, namely the ones that I put here. You have this Azure Bicep First Look, you have Introduction to Azure Bicep, Creating and Deploying Resources with GitHub Copilot. So you can check all these resources there. I'm going to share the link in the description of the video once this is uploaded to the YouTube channel. But meanwhile, if you are interested, I'm also going to put that in the chat here, so you can utilize that or you can check it out. Okay, that said, so what is Azure Bicep modules, right? So we talked about that modularity and how you can decompose large projects into reusable modules so that you can basically create module once. For example, you want to make sure that you have the specific requirements, how you define your storage account. There are specific tags, there are specific configuration requirements. Once you define them in the modules and you parameterize them, then you can reuse that across different deployments for your project. So that's kind of simple example just to give you an idea. But generally speaking, modules are a concept in programming that probably you are very familiar, which means that it's all about reusability, so you don't repeat the same code, and when you want to change something, you just change in one place. Next, we have type safety and IntelliSense that comes with Bicep modules. We have support for all Azure resource types, so you can use that support there, and it comes with idempotent deployments that you can rely on. And finally, it comes with integration with Azure Bicep Registry, meaning that you can take your modules and if you want them to be private to your organization, you can use container registry where you can have the version control and as well as the secure access to those Bicep modules. So that said, I want to go ahead and show you an example of it on our next demo. So in this demo, what we'll do, we'll be building we'll look into Azure Bicep. Specifically, we'll look out to build your deployment used on modules and parameters. How you can parameterize and how you can define the modules in Bicep and how to explore existing repo. So to do that, I'm going to switch to the Visual Studio Code. Let me open it up. But in a meanwhile, while I'm switching between, Visual Studio Code and the presentation, feel free to basically bring your questions, because primary purpose of this live event is to answer any questions that may come up there. So let me make it a little bigger. If you are watching on a mobile device, it would be much pleasant. So what we are going to do here is, let me show you certain things. First of all, this repo is Learn Bicep repo, and I'm going to put the link in the in this video description below. What it does, it's basically in this repo. I'll go to the again back to this GitHub repo that I'm managing. So here you should be able to see 𝗀𝗏𝗍𝗍. This is the same repo that I'm showing on the screen. So once you navigate there to the 𝗀𝗏𝗍𝗍, this is the same repo from where all the examples are going to come. You would find that here I have modules and I have samples. Usually those modules are used within the samples, and I will show you how they are related, but you can also go and read this post where some of these repos and solutions are used. So let me come back to the Visual Studio Code now after this small introduction into the let me go back after this short introduction to the 𝗀𝗏𝗍𝗍. Okay, so we are in the 𝗀𝗏𝗍𝗍. Before we start, I want to mention that, as you may see here, if I open the modules, you see these bicep icons. The reason why I see them is because here in the extensions, I have bicep extension installed. So let me show you. So you need to make sure that you also install that. That would bring a very rich feature interaction and tooling for bicep language in your Visual Studio Code environment. You can also do that on your Visual Studio, but usually Visual Studio is much more lighter, and it's good for small projects, so to speak. Anyway, so let me go back here to the code. So where we were is I was talking about bicep modules, right? And to look at the example where modularization is used, we are going to open the samples and we are going to look at this sample under the sample files. I have here under the samples, I'm going to open this 7-deploy modules with param. So what it is, it's basically a pretty long file. But before jumping into that, if you are not familiar with Bicep at all, let me just open a simple file here. You can call it storage.bicep, for example. So usually when you have a simple, bicep that's parameterized, what you would be able to see is this is the storage bicep file. You would see some parameters, right? They are defined. There's some description. There are some validation, how long or how short you want that to be. You have, of course, the parameter of the file, like storage name is obviously a string. You can use some string interpolation. So that's, which is here, can help you. But most importantly here, when you define the Azure Bicep resources, it needs to start with the keyword resource. You need to have a name for your Azure Bicep resource, and then you have the, this provider. Is it a storage? What you are creating basically? You define the type of your resource. In this case, the storage. It's a storage account, and then of course you define the API. Each Azure resource comes with its own API. And based on API, you get certain features. If you are looking to utilize some latest features, you may want to know which API version it belongs so that you can access them. Anyway, so once you have this basically defined, then you put the properties and names. To give you easier understanding about that, for example, if you start from scratch and you type just RES, which stands for the resource, you will see that it brings a nice IntelliSense here to choose from. For example, if with this resource, RES, let's say you want to create a resource group, okay? And then you type dash and then say group. Then, for example, if we choose the first one here on the left side here, you see it defines a resource group, and then there's something. So we will just press on tab here, and here we go. So we have resource. This is the name resource group. We can say for the demo, sake, we can say it's a resource group 01. Then you define the, you define the type of this resource, which is the resource group, and then the name. You put the name, for example, my demo resource group 01, and then you define the location. A location could be region where you want to deploy. In my case, it could be, East US 2, for example, whatever resource you want. So here you can also use like this _. The reason why it is squiggly red is because the scope of this bicep resource is a resource group. That's why we cannot define it here. If you want to define resource group, it needs to be scoped to the subscription. And what I mean by that, you would see on the example. But this is basically an easy way to start using this literally by typing res and choosing the template that you want for your resource. You can define it and have it in place. Okay, that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our original demo, which was this deploy modules. And here, as you may see, we have a different declaration here saying that we are targeting to deploy this on a subscription level. Then we have parameters defined here that you may go and look into them. We have a session tags for this. I call it Azure Bicep session, but you may we can always go and change this and may put like Azure Bicep, for example, demo. Okay, for meetup. And then, you define your environment. And next thing that you want to do is you can define the resources. In our case, this resource groups is the same resource. If you remember, this is the resource group that I just showed you on the previous kind of small demo where we actually declare a resource from the scratch. This is the resource group, again, defined with the name here. It has a location, it has some tags that are assigned to this resource. And then the name of this resource group is parameterized, it app resource group name. And if you go up and look into that, okay, this is going to be a parameter that's going to be provided to this file. Or you can also define this string where it can take auto-generated parameter name. Anyway, so here we have resource group. Next, we have a module. So next declaration, it doesn't say resource, it says module. And we see that it has this reference to a modules folder, app services. And it has some parameters here with the scope of this resource group. So in order to navigate there, you just click on your control button on your keyboard. And then if you click on it, you are going to be navigated to the app services.bicep, which is, again, it's defined in our code base, in our repository. And here, when we look at that, we see it has two resources. It has app service plan, and it has application service itself. And if you are new to that or it's kind of confusing, I will show you a lifesaver here to analyze those files. You can go and click into this Bicep visualizer. Okay, this is the very useful icon. When you click on that, it will tell you, it will try to visualize the code and show you the dependencies. So for this single file, well, where we are, that's an application. It's a web app service that deploys a application service plan and as well as the web app itself. Okay, and then as an output here, we see that it's the host name of this web app is provided as an output once the deployment and provisioning of the resources succeeded. Anyway, I'm going to go back here to the main file, and you would see that we have much more resources here. I don't want to take the whole time to explain that, but if you have any questions, okay, please put that in the chat. I will address them. I'm going to use this Bicep visualizer tool, which is really great tool here when you are trying to analyze a Bicep code that's totally new to you, and there are many lines in that. So I'm going to click on that. So when I look at that file, what I see here is that this 7-deploy modules file is pretty big, and it has 4 resource groups. It has app deployment, it has a Windows VM deployment, it has a Cosmos DB module deployment, and as well as storage account modules deployment. And if, for example, if you click any of them, it will navigate you to the code. So you can also use this to navigate into the specific code where it belongs. So in my case, I navigate to the app service here. Okay, So it will navigate where this code is defined. If it's a module, you will be navigated to the module. Okay, I hope that clarifies it. In terms of if you want to deploy this, let's say you want to give it a go and deploy these files. You can deploy these files with parameters that are defined here. And to do that, you can go and check these scripts. I have many scripts. If you never did Azure CLI before, I would highly recommend to follow the script. First, you would need to make sure you are authenticated using the Azure CLI or PowerShell, depending on your preference. And then you want to make sure you are in the correct subscription. And then you can run this deployment scripts based on subscription or resource group or whatever the scope you are deploying to. In my case, just to show you what does it mean is if you are connected well and it works, you should be able to show the account name here. For example, in my case, I'm going to run this command on my terminal. I'm already connected to the Azure subscription here. So it's trying to connect now. Let me clear it. Okay, and run this command again. Okay, so I'm connected to a subscription called MVP subscription 07. If I want to see all the table, all the resource groups that are inside the table, I can run the next command here, az group list -o table, which is the command here on top, as you see. This command, and then it will list all this resource group that I have here. And just to make sure that you understand that, what it brought is if I'm going to switch to the Azure portal here. So I'm in the Azure portal. So in this Azure portal, I have 24 resource groups, and they have some, some workloads that are running there. They are all belong to this. Let me actually make sure it's only the subscriptions that I have. So I have like 15 of them here. So if I go and provision new resource group here, we should see that there is one more appearing. And let's just, for the sake of the demo, do that. If we want to provision a new resource group within the East US2 region and want to give this resource group a name CM, which is Cloud Marathon or Bicep Demo 01, I'm going just to go and run this. And before running that, I'm going to clear the terminal. You can also type it there. I prefer to run them to the terminal. That's more safe so that there is no. So it ran and it set actually my subscription to MVP subscription 07. But I want to run next this command here to make sure that it actually creates the resource group that I just mentioned. So it says that it created this resource group here, it's successful. So if you go to our Azure portal now, and it doesn't appear right away, sometimes it takes time to come to the Azure portal, those new resources, but let's refresh this. So I see that I have 16 resources now, there's one more. And if we go and look into the second page here, I still don't see it. So let me refresh it again. All right. So here, if you look at our original script, which is script here, it should provision this resource group in our subscription. Okay, let me go back again. Sometimes it takes some time for portal to bring and show that to us. And if you don't see it here, that's fine. What you can do is you can always go back to your Visual Studio Code and you can actually list them here. So that's what I'm going to do. So we are going to expand this and we are going to list all the resource groups as it takes some time to appear on the Azure portal. And here, when we list all the groups, we should be able to see this resource group that we just provisioned. Again, it may not appear right away on the Azure portal. It usually takes some time, but with the CLI tools to this call, you can get it right away. So just want to make sure it's there and you understand it. Okay, that said, I want to switch back to our modularized template. So here, the main takeaway was that you can define your bicep in a modularized way. You can define your resources like resource groups, and then you can define modules, which are basically your individual bicep files that you wrap into the modules, and you use parameters as they are defined here to bring those resources. For example, this is the storage resource that defined here. And if you want to see how this storage param that bicep is actually created, you can always click on control and click on the file. It will navigate you to the place where this module is defined. So you can look into parameters and all the declaration that it has. All right, so I'm going to switch back to the place where we were. This was demo 1. Demo 2 is all about visualizer that you had a look, how to understand the complex projects. And we looked into visualizer and how to navigate there. And next, there are Azure Bicep extensions. So for extensibility, that's kind of part of this demonstration. It's very important. And extensions are here to expand the Bicep language capabilities by declaring and managing the Azure resources. For example, in this, in this graph that you see on the left, this Bicep extends is by providing access to the Microsoft Graph. It's a Microsoft Graph Bicep extension. It's built on top of, again, Bicep extensibility feature, and it lets you to create and deploy a limited number of Microsoft Graph resources. And when I say Microsoft Graph resources, I refer to the Microsoft Entra ID resources that you can create. For example, if you need to create some users, groups, this is the, for example, this example show how to create a group within the Microsoft Entra. It's one of the ways how you can simplify the deployment of complex environments, including the objects within your Microsoft Entra. Next, if you want to see the example of that and demo, I'm going to switch here to the to learn Bicep, the repo that I already showed you guys. So here what we are going to do is save this. To see that example, you can look at this file 25-graph bicep extension bicep. So what it does here, it creates a new Entra ID security group using the Microsoft Graph extension. To do that, you need to make sure that you have this extension Microsoft Graph v1. And what it is basically, I'm going to hold my control button and click on this extension. And you will see that what it is basically, it's going to navigate you to this bicep config file. So if you go, this is the bicep config file where the extension is defined. So in our case, I'm using this extension from my Microsoft provider with the version 1.0. That's how it is defined. So if you don't define that in your bicep configuration file, it's just going to be a red squiggly line. So make sure that it is defined here. So which is your bicep config.json file. So if it is defined there, and you go back to this example of the samples number 25, then you can go and run this, and at the end of this you would see that a resource group, not resource group, but a security group within Microsoft Entra by a given name here and unique name, my Azure Demo Group 01, is going to be created for you. Again, if you want to know how to run these instructions and how to make sure you can run it, I highly recommend to go and check the scripts here, the Azure Demo AZ-CLI. So here, if you want to run this end-to-end, you would have to run this block of the scripts, which is basically making sure that you're authenticated your Azure subscription. Second, here in second step, you would go and create a resource group, and this is the name, but you can change the name if you would like to, and then you will deploy that sample that I just show you, which basically creates the security group in your tenant, and it's going to be, that resource is going to be defined within your resource group. Okay, that's how it's going to work. Okay, that's it. Next year, I want to wrap up and show what we covered, and then I will move with the questions that I may see in the chat. So what we covered today, we started first with Cloud Marathon community, what it is, what we are trying to achieve here, and how you can join and be part of this awesome community. Next, we looked into how to start and have this express intro into Azure Bicep. There is awesome Azure Bicep resource that you can use, and there are also some videos like LinkedIn Learning that you can choose to learn from. Next, we looked into some code reusability in Bicep. We looked into how resources are defined, how you can package them into modules, and how you can use those modules across your Bicep infrastructure as a code declaration to reduce the complexity and have much more easier maintainable infrastructure code. Then we looked into extensibility. We looked into Microsoft Graph extensibility and how you can use that to also not just provision resources within your Microsoft Azure subscription, but also on the Microsoft Entra ID tenant, where you can create your users and groups in that tenant. And finally, we looked into some demos that I went through. I shared 2 different repos and how you can utilize them to practice and kind of get some hands-on skills within the process. That's it. This is the Q&A portion of this session. I know that I have a couple of people who are participating. So Gunnar, if you have any questions, feel free to come up, ask questions, or you can type in the chat if that's your preference. I'll wait here for a couple seconds. All good. So, all right. Thank you, Gunnar, actually for joining the session. If you come up with your question later on, it's still very cool. It's cool. Just put them in that video YouTube recording, which I'm going to publish over the weekend. So you can, again, you are always welcome to ask questions or see as it is the whole idea of this session is to help you start learning, understanding, and finding your way across infrastructure as a code in Microsoft environments or Microsoft Azure environments. So what you see here is if you are on your phone or mobile device, these are the QCR codes. 𝗏𝗏Bicep GitHub is one of the good places to look into. We mentioned awesome Azure Bicep, which is here. Introduction to Azure Bicep is the video course that you may check out. There's also built infrastructure as a code with Bicep part 1 and part 2. There is the Bicep project itself, which is the main, basically 𝗏𝗏Bicep is a GitHub where I had my code samples, but Bicep project is an official project of Microsoft where latest versions and the new updates are actually shared. So if you are into that, you are more than welcome to check that one as well. Okay, let's move forward here. We come to the end of our session. Again, thank you everyone who made the time to join live. And thank you for everyone who stayed here and watched this video till the end. Again, I'm going to add all those details into the description of the video that's going to be produced over the weekend. Enjoy the rest of your day and thank you for joining. Bye.